All right. During his news conference yesterday, Donald Trump threatened media outlets and journalists, promising more lawsuits against the press. Trump appeared more emboldened after ABC settled a defamation lawsuit with the president-elect over the weekend. The network issued an apology and agreed to give $15 million toward Trump's yet-to-be-built presidential library. Trump also mentioned other targets for legal action, including CBS News, journalist Bob Woodward, and the people of Iowa, referring to the Des Moines Register for publishing the Ann Seltzer poll that incorrectly predicted the presidential election.
I feel I have to do this. I shouldn't really be the one to do it. It should have been Justice Department or somebody else, but I have to do it. It costs a lot of money to do it, but we have to straighten out the press. Our press is very corrupt, almost as corrupt as our elections.
So, Willie, let's sort through this. First of all, on ABC, Bill Gruskin, who, of course, a professor, a journalist, a professor, said ABC shouldn't have folded. They shouldn't have paid the $15 million. And at the same time, he called the interview a, quote, train wreck, and said that it opened up ABC to liability. So at least there was a case there that would allow Trump's lawyers to open up discovery, do the sort of things that nobody at ABC and none of the journalists would want, turning over, cell phones, texts, emails, the sort of things that you see in some cases. So that's sitting right here. Ann Seltzer, Ann doesn't have to worry. The Des Moines Register, they don't have to worry. They will not get, the Trump team won't get past summary judgment. That'll be thrown out very quickly. CBS News, for their edits, what they did in the edit bay on 60 Minutes, doing what 60 Minutes has been doing for like 60 years. That's not going to get past
whatever he shows.
Summary judgment. Whatever show's been doing, that's going to be thrown out. New York Times going to sit there and they go, boom, thrown out. They're all going to get thrown out. There was, as Bill Gruskin and others said, there were mistakes made in that interview that allowed the process to go far enough for discovery to be opened up. Would ABC have won if they had fought to the end? There are a lot of lawyers that think they would have. Did ABC want to put it behind them for a variety of reasons? Yeah. But does that mean Ann Seltzer's going to have to worry about it? No. Does that mean the New York Times? No. Does that mean Bob Woodward and Simon Schuster's going to have? No. I mean, you go down the list, and all of those are going to be thrown out like that. So you can make the threats all you want to make the threats, but at the end of the day, we still have a pretty strong First Amendment, and that ain't going to change in the next 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps Donald Trump and his team are together emboldened by ABC forking over $15 million, but they also know that these are all very, very different cases from the ABC cases. You just laid out all those reasons for that. Defamation cases, famously and notoriously difficult to prove. So that's one thing that people should consider when we hear all this. And also, John, we've talked about Ann Seltzer. She got a poll wrong and then retired. So it's unclear what they're suing for exactly. And she conceded. She got it terribly wrong there. So this does, though, appear to be about a larger campaign, perhaps to intimidate, to bring to heel media organizations so that they are not critical of Donald Trump, because the message here is anything critical of me, we're going to go after and sue.
Right. I think two things are true ones. As Joe just ticked through, the individual cases that Trump is suing about now all seem like non-starters. But this is about also intimidating work going forward. Yeah. The idea that reporters and journalists and institutions may not have $15 million laying around to pay. That they may just try, even just have a reporter think twice about writing something or tone down the tenor of a coverage, Jillian. It does seem like this is not just about the past. This is more about the present and future, and trying to be a warning here to anyone who dares criticize this administration that, hey, at the very least, we'll make your life hard and expensive.
Absolutely. I mean, the irony is the Trump team keeps talking about freedom of speech, which implies they're against censorship. And yet they're trying to create a climate of fear that creates self-censorship. They're trying to essentially bully the media into being careful what they say in advance. And it very much mirrors what he's trying to do with other governments right now in terms of making these massive threats, trying to get them to cave and to offer up some kind of correction. We saw that with Mexico with a sudden big raid on the fentanyl suppliers and traders. And you're going to see more and more of that, where essentially I sometimes imagine the Trump team's a bit like somebody confronting a bear on a mountain path, where they're trying to make themselves as big as possible, growl enormously, and then hope the bear goes away. And that's what they're trying to do to regard what they regard as their rivals and enemies.
And I mean, if Peter Baker, if you're in the New York Times and you're that bear, you're not going away. You can say the same thing about other media outlets too. Again, they've tried this before, but you know, the suit against the New York Times, the suit against CBS News, the suit against Bob Woodward, Simon and Schuster. I mean, those cases, don't you think at the end of the day, those cases are going to be thrown out of court?
Well, look, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but you're right to say I think that he is stretching the definition of what used to be, legitimate lawsuits against media organizations that went too far. Now, it's been reported, and that he sent a letter to the New York Times just before the election, threatening another possible legal action, including regarding an article that I wrote and articles that some of my colleagues wrote. Our lawyers will respond to that. Not too worried about it. But I think the point is exactly that he is trying to tie up media organizations, make them think twice. Remember, he sued Tim O'Brien, who used to work at the New York Times, wrote a very good biography of Donald Trump, because Tim O'Brien reported in his book that he wasn't worth as much as Trump like to believe he was worth. They had an entire lawsuit about this. That's hardly, it's hardly the kind of defamation thing you would normally consider to be defamation, but whatever. It went through the courts. He didn't win. But he later said he was glad he did it anyway, because it cost Tim O'Brien money and time and suffering and all that kind of thing. That's part of the goal here. He doesn't have to win in order to do it. The strategy isn't necessarily to win, but to put people on their heels and to pay a lot of legal bills at times. That's not an inconsiderable thing for a lot of news organizations. The New York Times has plenty for our lawyers, but there are a lot of news organizations that don't.
And Gillian, I mean, Financial Times isn't going to change their coverage because of a threat of a lawsuit, right?
Well, absolutely. We're going to carry on doing what we always do and just try and tell it as we see it and try and understand above all else where the money's going and who's got it and how that relates to the power. So, I think every single journalist right now is in many ways emboldened. And the question really is, does Donald Trump want to make martyrs of the media world? Because in many ways, that would actually not serve him well at all.
Right. Well, and that goes for retribution in general.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of Republicans who think Donald Trump was made a martyr because he sat at a defendant's bench all summer, and that actually made him bigger in the eyes of the public. Does he want to do that to those that he doesn't like? I don't think it makes sense.
Chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker, thank you very much, and columnist and member of the editorial board at the Financial Times. Gillian Tett, thank you. Always good to see you. Great to have you back on.